Would you join me in our prayer? Most gracious Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day that you've given us today, and now as we meet twilight, we ask that you be with us and continue to be over us and watch over us and protect us. Father, we're so thankful for all the many blessings that we have as spring now comes within Rutherford County, its beauty and the many blessings that we have here, and continue to look after us. Father, our thoughts now go and our prayers go to the city of Knoxville and the experience and the tragedy they have had up there this afternoon. Be with those individuals, be with those that are taking care of that situation. Watch over them, protect them, and give them the comfort and care that they're needing. Father, be with us this evening as we go about making the decisions for this county. Give us direction and guidance as we do so. Be with us all. We offer this prayer in our Son's holy name. Amen. Amen. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. This meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission is being conducted electronically pursuant to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order 16. I would ask for a motion that conducting the meeting electronically is necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare in light of the coronavirus.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Your response to this motion will also serve as our roll call. Gail?
Charlotte P. Yes. Chip Pinion. Craig Lynch. David Jones.
Yes.
Jim Aberwater.
Yes.
Lee Bogle. Yes. Marvin Whitworth.
Yes.
Mike Cush.
Yes.
Pattis Reed.
Yes.
Rhonda Allen. Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Motion carries and we have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. At this time, we need to approve our minutes for the February 22nd and March 22nd meeting. I'll call on our Vice Chair, Pattis Reed.
Mr. Chairman, I have read over those minutes. I have found no problems, and at this time I make the motion that they be approved.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the February 22nd and March 22nd meeting minutes. Call the roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P. Yes. Chip Pinion. Yes. Craig Lynch. David Jones.
Yes.
Jim Aberwater.
Yes.
Lee Bogle. Yes. Marvin Whitworth.
Yes.
Mike Cush.
Yes.
Pattis Reed.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Gail. We have no items withdrawn or deferred. Item 6 is new business. 6A, we have one item submitted for a final plat approval. 6AA, lot 1, 2, and 3, Piles Chapel, Hollingshead subdivision. The item number is 21-2011, 3 lots on 3.69 acres zoned RM, located along Piles Chapel Road. Hollingshead Rental Company is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, Commission members. This item before you right now was removed from the Planning Commission's agenda last month at the March 22nd meeting. The applicant is proposing to split this property into 3 parcels. Lot 3 contains the existing house. Lots 1 and 2 will be future building lots. There is an existing fire hydrant located about 900 feet to the south of the property, but when they split the lot, lots 1 and 2 would be outside of the 1,000-foot requirement found in our subdivision regulations. Information from CUD does show that this line can support a hydrant. They have shown that proposed location on the plat. Our comments have been addressed. Obviously, we won't sign it until CUD, TDEC, and all the others sign off on it, but as far as we're concerned, the plat's in good order, so we'd recommend approval.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve subject to all staff comments.
Thank you, Chip. We have a motion and a second to approve item 21-2011, lots 1, 2, and 3, Piles Chapel, Hollingshead subdivision. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P. Yes. Chip Pinion. Yes. Craig Lynch. David Jones.
Yes.
Jim Aberwater.
Yes.
Lee Bogle. Yes. Marvin Whitworth.
Yes.
Mike Cush.
Aye.
Pattis Reed.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 6B, these are rezoning and ordinance amendment requests that are scheduled for a public hearing. Item 6BA, REZ 21-002, Davis Lamb for NRV Incorporated. Location is 4871 Lebanon Pike. Commission district is 14. County Commissioner is Virgil Gammon. Size of the site is approximately 57 acres. Tax map is 47. Existing zoning is RM for residential medium density. Proposed zoning is PUD for planned unit development for a residential subdivision. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Board members will recall this application was actually deferred at the Planning Commission's February 8th, 2021 meeting due to a variety of concerns, mostly dealing with off-street parking, density, and proposed access onto Lebanon Pike. Regarding density, I'll just kind of take these kind of one by one. The revised pattern book that they submitted to us proposes the same amount of units as what was being considered during the February meeting, which was 180. Now, the originally submitted application prior to it coming to the public hearing back in February actually had actually it was over 200 units, but they did reduce it to 180 due to step soil availability. So that gives them a proposed density of 3.15 units per acre. Most conventionally zoned single-family developments in the county range anywhere from 1 to 1.5 units per acre. There are some approved PUDs that average around 2. There's actually a couple, and Mike, if you want to put that chart up, that it should be on the PUD study one. Yeah, PUD comparison chart. Yeah, this is not on your iPads, but I just wanted to have this for you. This was, we did some research on this. This isn't the most updated list that we've got because this was just something I found. It's about a couple of years old. As you can see, most of our PUDs are going to be anywhere around, as you can see on there, 2 to 2.5 units an acre. There are a couple of outliers on there, namely Davenport Station and Valley Farms, which are both over 4. But the majority that you're seeing are anywhere from 2, 2.5. There are some that are a little less than 2 on there that you can see. So I just wanted to at least present that to you for your information. The comprehensive plan in this area does recommend up to 10 units an acre. So from just a density standpoint, we do think it's consistent with what the recommendations of the plan are, and through looking at the different plan developments that we've approved in the past, fairly comparable to some of that, probably on the high side a little bit, but I just at least wanted to give you that information so you had that. Access and parking was also a big issue. Access, and especially I'll let Mike deal with that, but when it comes to parking, some of the issues that were discussed during the last Planning Commission meeting, the applicant is providing a total of 56 off-street parking areas throughout the development. You'll recall with the last pattern book and concept plan that he had, that phase 1 was showing pretty much a garage space and then a driveway space. So what they ended up doing for phase 1 is widening out the driveways in phase 1 so they would each would have enough for 2 spaces in the driveway still, and then have still having the one in the garage. So they would have a total of 3. Now, there was some discussion, as you recall, at the last Planning Commission meeting about how many of those garages are actually going to be used for storage versus actually parking your car. But they have added additional parking by widening out those drives. So I did want to point that out to you as well. As far as access to the property, we had a lot of concerns about site distance, and they have made some modifications to that. They have provided a revised site distance study. I'm going to let Mike discuss that in a little more detail.
So they did revise their site distance evaluation, and I will pull that up. This is the study updated April 7th. Let me get to where they're showing the turn lanes. And that was one of the issues that I had wanted them to look at in more detail, is considering the 2 turn lanes that's being added on to the Lebanon Highway. So they looked at it, showed an individual standing 14.5 feet off of the thoroughfare of the southbound lane of Lebanon Pike, and and then took measurements on either side. That was the initial one. And then what they decided is to come back and revise the entrance maybe 100 foot farther south from where they originally showed it. I think it was a little bit farther up here, because the issues I have was the proverbial rock in the hard place, the cemetery right here, the little bend in the road, and the close proximity of the river, and then the topography as it climbs up on the property. So what they did is they added this turn lane intersection sight distance evaluation, and you could see the two triangles from the left and right. What they're using is AASHTO. It's the Green Book, and it's a copy of it right here. So it's the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, and this is essentially the Bible on how to design roads and whatnot. So they're using this based on the design speed of 231 Lebanon Pike, seeing if they have enough room or enough visibility to see coming out of the site. And if you recall in the last meeting, I asked for a little more evaluation because I feel this is, the only entrance in. There might be another one in the future in the back, but we don't know if the issues with the city's development being able to make that connection. So even though this is a site plan specific design issue, I feel like this is the only entrance that this development will see for a long time. So I think it's critical because of the challenges that they evaluate this a little bit more. So they come back with this site design showing the site triangles and the turn lane movements. But I would like to point out that this needs a little more work itself. What I feel like needs to happen, because of the topographic challenges, and I know they don't want to spend any money, but I think you really need to have a grading plan showing the road profile of how it's going to operate and how everything's going to work together. With the proximity of the East Fork of the Stones River, they can't move everything this way, so everything's got to go towards the site. And north is, I guess, to the right as you're looking at it on the screen. So all the work is being pushed in towards the development. So what they're doing with this is they're showing us, saying, hey, we've got enough of a sight distance to see coming and going. However, if you look at these triangles, you can see the point of these triangles. That's where the driver's supposed to sit, of somebody coming out of the site. So they set the offset triangle 14 feet off the southbound lane right here. But actually, the driver, unless you make them creep out past the stop bar, that driver's actually going to sit back here, if you can see my cursor, about 10 feet past this stop bar. So that's where the sight triangle measurement needs to happen. So that's what I'm trying to harp on. The ground that the site is at a steep incline. You're widening 231 out even farther into that. So I think this needs some more work, and I can go back to the original photograph that they showed early on. Here's the part of the Green Book that they added to the study, and this triangle point, the corner right here of this triangle, is your decision point. That's where the driver's sitting. That's what I'm trying to stress to y'all, that the driver's not going to, their plan is showing that the driver has to creep over the stop bar to see adequately enough either direction. So what I'm saying is the driver needs to step and sit where the driver is going to sit so there's no driver confusion. You don't want to require somebody to creep out past the stop bar. You need to have your sight vision worked out so you can see adequately left and right. And I'll show you this photograph. You know, it's Doug's fault. He threw it over to me. So I do have a tendency to ramble, and I'll zoom in a little bit. So this is the current condition of southbound traffic on Lebanon Pike. And this gentleman is in the yellow vest is approximately 14 and a half feet off of the thoroughfare, the through lane, the southbound through lane. So that's what AASHTO says, except there is a part in here that says the appropriate measurement of a distance A1, which is the site decision point, let's see, depends on the placement of any marked stop line and that may be present and thus may vary with site-specific conditions. So that's saying if you're adding turn lanes, this guy is going to go back into the hill. You got 12 feet for a northbound left turn lane, 12 feet for a right-bound right turn lane, and then the stop bar, and then the driver. So you're looking at 34 feet from the edge of this travel lane to back here. So unless you design the site with the topography in consideration of the existing and proposed topography, you don't know if this is going to work. This is not, I don't believe this will work the way it is. So they say it does in the study, but like I'm saying is they need to evaluate where a driver will sit when they're waiting to pull out. So that's what I was trying to stress on the earlier meeting, and I did a poor job of. Even though it's a site-specific, a site plan requirement, I think they need to look at what grading operation is going to happen at this entrance. You know, you've got the road coming in, you've got to consider the existing ground cover topography on either side. So that's what I was looking for, was a more in detailed study of what's happening at this entrance. Because this driver, he'll be sitting 3.5 feet off the ground, is going to be back 34 feet from the edge of this road. So that's my issue. We got to have enough room, visibility to see in and out. That's what I was looking for. And I'm sorry if I ramble.
Are there any plans that you're aware of to clear out those trees right there where you're talking about?
They'll have to have trees removed. They'll have to have ground removed. They're going to have a lot of retaining wall. Because they're pushing everything towards the property, you can't go towards the river. Since they're going all towards the property, you're going to have a lot of retaining walls built back here to have the site distance. So when somebody pulls out of the new road coming out, they've got adequate time. And there's a slight curve. You can kind of see the slight curve in this image. So that's the rock and the hard place I was talking about earlier. Because the cemetery is right back here that's going to prohibit how much you can pull out. So that's one thing I think needs some more work on. There is I believe a plan for a secondary entrance. The adjacent property to the south has 2 driveway entrances on 231 on Lebanon Pike. They have one to the south that's not changing and one to the north. This is their existing driveway here. So, and that's something that we brought up at another meeting is they're going to lose their access. So this is a proposed plan to show how they're going to extend the driveway through their site and put it in this 3-lane intersection. So that's going to be something that we need to look at pretty carefully. You know, is that the best place to put a driveway? Has this neighbor been contacted? You know, are they okay with this location? So with, cars stacking up, waiting to pull out of here, her driveway's blocked for these 2 turn lanes. So that's something we need to kind of consider. And as I mentioned earlier, the second connection to the west might not happen. So this is something we need to consider strongly. The city development encountered some wetlands or endangered
Flora.
species, flora. Yes, thank you. Back here. So before this development and this road network can extend, that has to get mitigated or somehow considered. They have added another connection point to their roundabout up here, but we don't know if or when this will ever develop. So this is our only shot. That's why I'm harping on that pretty heavily. US 231 Lebanon Pike is planned to be a 5-lane road. We don't know when, but looking at the position of the river, the steep topography on the east side of 231, I'm thinking most of it's going to go towards the site. So they'll incorporate, if this thing gets approved and moves forward, they will incorporate the left turn lane and the right turn lane that's being installed, and that will those lanes will become part of the 5-lane section. So we need to consider that. And then that, like I said, this is a critical entrance in and out, so we need to be careful coming and going. And then, I'll chime in on other items as they come up, but that's my big concern is the access in and out.
Mike, question. Was there some concern at our last discussion about the 12-inch, was it a 12-inch water line across the street?
There
Or
is
sewer line, something?
There's a sewer force main coming from the landfill. It's a 4-inch, I believe, force main that collects the leachate off the Republic's landfill and takes it to the city sewer treatment plant. But it comes right through this property, and I'll show you.
Was it creating some kind of interference that we had a question? Was there an interference problem we had with it? That it seems there was some discussion.
Will most likely need to be lowered.
Okay.
I would say that's what's going to happen. So
does that mean that you'd have to put a pump on it to pump it then back?
Probably. They'll probably have to do a temporary jumper line around it while they construct the bypass. So I'll zoom in a little bit and show you. That's one force main that runs through the property. Is right here. Is this purplish line? Oops. Let me go back one. Right here. Kind of goes around the cemetery at the top and then skirts along the front of the property here. So with them having to lower the new road coming in to meet design criteria, they're most likely going to encounter that force main and need to lower it as well. There's a 12-inch water line across the street. They should be all right with that. They'll have to, I would say that the state will probably want them to bore underneath 231 to make that connection. So that's something else we'll have to cross down the road. But let me zoom out a little bit more. There is another force main to the west, and that will have to be incorporated. That comes from the Walter Hill School, and the Walter Hill Elementary School is connected to the city sewer system. So with this is a force main line that runs through the property, and they'll just have to work around it. I think they've got their traffic circle right here in this area and parking lot and some other area. They won't build on top of it, so, and they'll have to confirm its exact location. So.
I will say the applicants are present. If you've got questions for them, I think they had a presentation they wanted to go through as well. So.
Very good. Mike, have you addressed these concerns with the applicant, and have they given you some response?
They have not. No, I have not. I was on vacation the week before last, so I did not. Just getting to this now, but what I was trying to stress at the previous meeting in February is that typically grading and drainage, modifying the land is a site design that we see at the site plan and construction plans. But I think it's important to look at that here, because we're widening 231. It's a normal crown section, so it's going to slope towards the center line of 231 is right at this edge right here. So it's going to slope that way for another 24 feet. And then we'll have a landing right here at these turn lanes of approximately 50 feet. And then we can start going back up, climbing up the hill. But if you're sitting here behind the stop bar, you are going to have a time trying to see on either side of this hill. And that's what I thought we needed more of, is more of an engineer design evaluation.
Mike, point of reference, I noticed your green book from AASHTO has got a 2011 edition date on the cover. Is that the latest current edition?
That's the one I'm using.
I tried
That's
to
the
do
one they use.
I tried to do a Google search on the iPad and I couldn't make a connection.
They are not as frequent with their updates as other design.
I guess my question is, are we sure we're working on the current intersection and or turn design criteria from AASHTO?
We will confer with the design engineer and we will check as well, but I believe this is the current one.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff, please.
Yes.
Mike, have you been out to the site and actually done a physical review on this property?
Yes. I went back.
So I'm looking at a couple of things here on Google Earth. One is the existing driveway. And I can see as you do the street view thing and you go down the street, there's quite a bit of trees there and probably a pretty good grade there. It looks like there's a pretty good elevation change. But then when you get up to the driveway of this property, it looks, I wouldn't say flat, but it's a very, very moderate slope from the street up to the house. Is that an optical illusion? I mean, it looks like the steepness to the house doesn't start for a pretty good ways back from the road.
No, there is a little bit of a flat-ish point area in between. Let me turn on the topography and you'll be able to see that. But this is the driveway, the existing driveway locations where they're tied into 231. And as soon as my map will draw.
And will the new driveway entrance be south of that existing driveway?
This. So, yes, a little bit south of this. And the gremlins are working again against me. So, let me go to...
Can you get a street view, maybe?
Yeah, I could do that as well. So, right here is what we're talking about.
Yeah, see the driveway on the left goes over to the neighbor's house, and they have if you look at the aerial on their house, they have a really nice asphalt driveway that actually comes out to the south. So this is just like a frontage road that comes down 231. And it looks like they're using the other side that's asphalt primarily, but I may be mistaken. But it's a pretty nice driveway and a nice home.
Yes.
Now, this area, the area there that you're looking at in that view, is that not fairly flat there for the first, I don't know what that distance would be, 30, 40 feet or something there?
Right.
So I guess what I'm thinking is if the new entrance is south of that, you're actually looking across the existing driveway, which appears to be fairly flat and fairly open.
So
I'm just wondering how much a person's sight is going to be affected, even if their car was backed up to the stop bar that you speak of.
Okay, so on the screen is, my GIS map's not working right now, so this is where the two driveway are tied into Lebanon Pike. And yes, it is a little flat right here, but remember you're adding two 12-foot lanes on top of this. So there's 24 feet, and then you're starting to climb up. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Whoops, wrong way.
So do you have any way to scale the distance between the existing roadway back, say the 35 feet on that, so we can see what the topography is at that point, or see what elevation it would be, how many feet above the road it would be?
Okay, let me turn off the aerial so we might be able to see a little bit better. So the proposed entrance is in this area right here. And that is, there's 2 feet, these are 2-foot contour intervals. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 feet, and then it keeps going up.
What is the blue line that runs through there? Is that a property line?
That's the sewer force main right there.
Okay.
And the greenish line, it might look a little different on one screen or the other, but that's the sewer force main. That's the right-of-way, the edge of the right-of-way. And I'll turn the aerial back on. So that's, you can kind of see the front of the house. This is why they don't come straight back out. You know, there's 2, 4, 6,
right.
16, 18 feet from the
that's
front of the
pretty
property
steep there.
down. So they have to do the long frontage road like you're talking about.
Yeah, their drive appears to head to the south more than it does to the north. And there's a nice driveway that comes out just south of there, but I guess that's another subject.
Right, and they might be okay.
That's
with
my concern is, I guess, 20 feet back from the road, how far, from the existing road, how far above the highway will they be?
Highway, I'm sorry, could you say that again?
How high above 231 will they be if they were back, you said, I guess, 35 feet, 34 feet from the road?
Right.
For where the car would be sitting?
Just give us a minute.
Well, apparently the web GIS is having some issues too, but there's still, you could see from so they're proposing to come in somewhere right in here, maybe a little bit farther right in here. So this is an embankment, this is like 3 to 1 right here.
Right.
And then it climbs up a little bit higher. So
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure if there's going to be an embankment obstructing their vision looking to the north, or how much obstruction there will be. Guess it's just something that we can't tell from Google Earth. That's all I had.
yes, sir.
Trying to build a picture in my mind.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Mike, I remember from manual uniform traffic control devices that there's flexibility in placement of that stop bar. But could you refresh me? The edge of travel way is where the distance is measured from, but when you have a right turn lane, does it go from that
It's
edge line?
usually sitting outside of that right
So
turn
that's
lane.
an additional 11 or 12 feet depending on lane width. Okay.
Right.
All
Yes,
right.
sir.
I was trying to go through that. I know the range is typically 4 feet to 30 feet.
4 feet back from the travel lane at least.
Okay, but that has to include that right turn lane in this case. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? You ready to hear from the applicant? We're going to do this before the public hearing so we can ask some questions. Is the applicant available? Please come forward, if you would. State your name and address.
Grant Shiring with PVE, 2000 Georgetown Drive. Actually, I'm sorry, 1425 Columbia Avenue, Franklin, Tennessee. Okay, I'm going to start with the most recent one because there was a lot. In terms of the turn lane, specific to grading, we have not prepared a grading plan yet, but we will as part of the site plan approvals. We will do grading. We're going to hire a geotech. We need to do subsurface investigation to make sure site balances and we all have all the correct profiles and grades of roads for the site. So that is something we will look at. With this concept plan, the plan is to is to come off of Lebanon at grade with a slight grade upwards, as Mr. Hughes is talking about. I do not believe the level of grading that is being described is going to be as significant as it's being framed. The previous meeting, the quote, the rock in the hard place was between the cemetery and the slope that went down to the stream. So one of the reasons that we moved that entrance further to the south was to get away from those hard places, the cemetery. Now, in the original design, there was potential, we looked at it in detail, there was potential that we would have to build a wall next to the cemetery to prevent any disturbance from that area. Because we moved that entrance to the south, grading no longer becomes an issue because we control the property frontage. So we can tie back, we could slope those grades gradually back to prevent the need for a wall and to also make sure that site distance is not obstructed. The site distance chart that is within the analysis shows that we meet the minimums, but there is actually additional site distance that is what is shown in the chart. Moving that to the south helped improve the site distance as well. We had it at the north, and Lebanon Pike does have a slight curve towards the north, correct? So moving it to the south only opened up that site distance and improved it even more. So I think the move that was made based off last meeting improved site distance, and it also improved the flexibility that we have to work with the grades to keep site distance and make sure that there's no issues with that entrance. In terms of the secondary drive for the neighbor, we have not performed the full ALTA survey, but we are going to. We have conducted the title search. There is no easement for that secondary drive, and we do not believe that it is something that they are using heavily. We have not reached out yet, but we plan to do so. We believe that is also a site plan item. If we, in conversation with that adjacent owner, decide that we will preserve that entrance, the graphic that we have shown is simply illustrating that we have the ability to do so. The comment about the right turn and left turn at the entrance, I do not disagree that we might need to look at that in more detail for where that secondary drive is coming into our left and right turn out. There is flexibility in making some slight adjustments to those townhome units to slide them down a little bit if we need some more room to look at other options for the way that drive comes in. However, at this time, there is no easement for that, but we will reach out to see if there is any plans in the future to try and preserve that. I'll stop there and see if there's any additional questions on site distance or comments, and then we can go into the other items. One other comment too. So on the west side of Lebanon with the stream, we are holding that edge, east side, thank you, east side. We are holding that edge of pavement. So we will not have issues with grading on that side. That is a steep slope, and we do want to stay away from that.
Quick question about parking. It's becoming more and more of an issue, and as we get into more and more planned units, we're getting more and more history that comes in, and some of the issues that we've faced over the last 10 years as we've had more and more planned units has been parking. And we have a concern about street parking. The HOA is going to have restrictions on street parking.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
And could there also be a note placed on those HOA that the planning department has requested that no parking be allowed on the street in case the HOA decided to make changes to that at some point in the future?
Yes, we could do that,
very
yes.
good.
If I could interject, I think you could just put that in the pattern book. That would, put it in the HOA documents, of course.
I agree.
Put it in the PUD, that'd be.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yes, I'd like to ask a couple of questions, please, sir. I talked to Doug about this about 10 days, 2 weeks ago. I'm a little concerned that we only have that one way in, one way out. Secondary question is, how wide is the street back through that?
The street would meet county requirements, which I believe is 24 feet.
Okay, if we have a fire at the first house, and we pull in 2 fire trucks and a couple of police cars, everybody back of that can't get in or out because they're going to take that 24 feet up. Is there going to be another way out? If I live in house number 182 up here, I can't get to work, I can't get to the hospital, my family can't get home from school. To me, that's a problem. Me being like I am, I got a 4-wheel drive truck, I can get out. They might not want me to get out, but I can get out. But I think that's a concern that we're going to put 400 or 500 people in with a, albeit slight, chance that they could be blocked in for an indefinite period of time. I know we had that situation in another subdivision 20 years ago with a tornado coming through that people couldn't get in and out. The other question I have is somewhat, will there be a construction entrance to this?
Yes, sir, there will. And it would be off of Lebanon.
Okay, but it will not be going in front of all these houses. In the second phase, for example, everybody in phase 1 will not have the service trucks coming in and out as the houses in the second phase are being built.
There would be a portion of time where the construction vehicles are going past units in phase 1 to get into phase 2. Yes, there would be.
Okay.
On the entrances, there is the stub to the west, which Mr. Hughes had hit on, and with the wetlands on the adjacent property, I understand that's a potential difficulty in making that connection. But we have added the stub road to the north at the turnaround location, and the likelihood, I think, of that property developing is probably high.
And Mr. Whitworth, if I can just interject as well. I mean, right, we talked about that, and I relayed the concerns to Mr. Shiring about that. I know that's something that we fight even in regular subdivisions, that's a concern that we have. Even subdivisions only have, like, say, 80 to 100 lots, having one way in, one way out. We do encourage the stub streets to adjacent properties as much as we can. Unfortunately, we just can't plan for every eventuality that's there. Hopefully what you're talking about would never happen. In the event that it does, hopefully the way that the cars or like the emergency vehicles that respond will respond in such a way that they do at least have one area or one lane of traffic that's passable, because I mean the police and the fire, they're going to know that people still need to get in and out. But like you said, if a tornado comes through, something like that, I mean you can't plan for everything that happens. But your concerns are definitely well noted.
Other questions of the applicant at this time?
Chairman,
Pettis.
these are, I think I understand, they are 4-unit clusters, 3-bedroom
Yes, sir.
units. And individuals come in there and would buy 1 unit or what they need there, the 1 unit. And they would be required to join a homeowners association.
Yes, sir.
Will that homeowners association require that once they purchase that they cannot rent or lease that property?
It should. Okay,
Has to be all owners.
correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you. Stay close.
Will do.
This time I'll declare the public hearing open for REZ 21-002, Davis Lamb for NRV. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this zoning request, please come forward. Anyone online via Zoom? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question for Mike.
Yes, David.
Mike, you said something about some more concerns that you had other than the turning lanes and the entrance. Are those other concerns something that we need to discuss also?
Yes, well, it came up in the last meeting and kind of in this meeting as well. It's just the parking. You have 3-bedroom unit. You can have a mom and dad in 1 bedroom and 2 grown-up kids in the other 2 bedrooms, or a visitor or whatever. And I mentioned the Department of Energy study that said that half of homes with 2-car garages are completely full, and the other quarter of the houses in the study, one of the garages is already full. So there's a preponderance of evidence saying that even though they're counting the garage space, most people are going to store stuff in their garage instead of their cars. So I don't feel that this adequately addresses parking, and then we're going to see a lot of on-street parking. We have some homeowners associations that are very up for, very active, some not so much. So I think we're not showing enough parking here, in my opinion. I mean, I just think with counting the garage and 2 cars outside, but you have a 3-bedroom minimum house or unit, you're going to have more people. And then the location of these parking, the additional parking, that's several hundred feet away from the middle units here. So somebody that comes to visit, they've got to park down here, walk down here, to the middle unit to see their friend or family or whatnot, and then come back. Most people are just going to park, find a wide spot in the road and park. That's one of my concerns.
Doug, is there a sidewalk on either side down through here?
There's sidewalk on one side.
Side?
Yes, sir. And Mike and I talked about the parking a little earlier today, as a matter of fact, and I pointed out to him, and I'll point out to you as well, the zoning ordinance regulations that we have right now for 1-family, 2-family dwellings, townhomes, etc. You're looking at 2 spaces per dwelling unit. That's the requirement, which, if you're just looking at driveway spaces, they do meet. that is what our code would require for that. Now, that's just the minimum. You know, they can provide additional parking, and most of the subdivisions and things that we see, especially with planned developments, we do see room for additional parking, especially with a larger front setback. Now, I know that there are some design challenges in this that they have some concerns about. If they push them back too far, they start getting into their step soils. So I just wanted you at least to be aware of the fact that, you know, our ordinance does call for 2 spaces per unit. And you know, there may be ways to, you know, maybe move some of those parking areas around a little bit where they're a little more centrally located. Again, I understand what Mike is saying, especially between those first 2 lots, the one on the roundabout and then the one closer to the front. Those are fairly spaced out right through there. There may be an opportunity to move that around, maybe even fudge it a little bit, get a little extra parking area in there. I believe they are showing 56 additional parking spots in those lots. So just so you all are aware of that.
Just the overall density as well. I think that the density is way too much. I mean, if this were just a straight up step system subdivision, I mean, you're probably looking at 100, 110 lots, maybe, if you're lucky.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a question on the density as well. I want to go back to the chart that you had, Doug, about the units per acre. And did I hear correctly that this is 10 units per acre?
No, I said the comprehensive plan, the area that's in, it's called the general urban area. It recommends up to 10 units an acre. What they're proposing is 3.15 units per acre. Now, just as comparison, you can see the chart up there on the screen. Well, maybe I guess you can. You can kind of see some of the density that we've seen some of the other planned developments. Again, it's kind of over a map, generally around 2.5. There's a few that are a little less, a couple that are more. The development that's in the city, which is I guess that'd be to the west, which is about, I would say, behind this particular development, its density is about 2.7 is what they're looking at. So it's roughly comparable. It's a little bit more than what they approve for in the city. Now the city's development, again, it's a single family development, detached. It's not, as I recall, it's not an attached product in that area, but you know, it's about 2.6 units per 2.7 to 2.68. It's about 100 units on 37.5 acres. This is, you know, 180 units on 57 acres, just to give you a little bit of a comparison between the two.
But you got to factor in they're on the city sewer.
Right.
So they're only utilizing the usable land. If you took out the step system, the density would be a lot higher.
Mike, can they meet your requirements of what you are asking for, or is that they think is an impossibility?
No, I mean, it can happen. You'll have a lot of grading, earthwork. You'll have to move the hill back, like Mr. Shiring had mentioned, but I don't know if just sloping the hill will work all the way. I think with that slight bend in the road where the cemetery is located, that's the fixed point. Even though they did move the driveway proposed entrance down 100 feet, you know, if all factors, you know, adding the turn lanes all on that side, grading, everything, I don't know if there's enough right now sight distance. That's what I was asking for, some more study.
So you need a little more information, a little more time, a little more,
yes, sir.
A little more work to. That's our hang up here right now, though, and it is the driveway.
That's my biggest hang up is the safe ingress and egress in and out of this
I think it's ours too. If it's yours, it's ours.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
If it's his hang up, it's our hang up. If Mike's not happy, Mike's here, he's got a job, we'll listen to Mike.
You know, Like I said, the last meeting, nothing is impossible, but it can be done with a lot of grading.
Good.
Retaining walls. I hope it can be done. I'd hate to have to relocate graves to make it work. I don't want to see that happen.
Well, let me just throw this out there just for consideration. This was presented to the Planning Commission back in February. Okay, our plan of development regulations require us, or the Planning Commission, to make a recommendation within 60 days. Now, that can be waived if the applicant waives it for a deferral, but at this point, we're pretty much at that. I don't think we can do another deferral unless we get the applicant's blessing to do a deferral. I think a lot of it's going to come down to, Mike's concerns, of course, are very valid, and I'm not an engineer, so I defer to him in those kind of matters. The applicant feels that they can make those improvements. If for some reason, if this is approved and they come back and it turns out they can't make those improvements, we're going to hold them to what they said they were going to do. They couldn't come back and say, well, gosh, guys, we can't fit this in there after all. We're just not going to do it. That's not going to work. Their traffic study and everything said this is the things that they're going to have to do. Of course, with the AASHTO standards that Mike was referring to, those are going to have to be met. And if they're not, they're going to have to redesign and bring something back to us that's going to meet it. Now, if the change is significant enough that it has to come through, and we've seen that happen for other concerns, things when you start looking at like the wetlands issues that we've run into a few times with plan developments, where they submit a plan just to come back a few months later because it turns out that there was wetland soils they didn't anticipate and they had to kind of redesign. We've run into that a couple times where they had to redesign it so much we had to do an amendment, or we had to consider an amendment. So even if this does go forward, which I'm not saying, I'm not recommending one way or the other, I'm just saying these are things that need to be considered, especially in light of the fact that we are at the 60-day mark at this point, and without an okay for deferral by the applicant, I think we need to make a decision tonight, one way or the other, about it. And this is a rezoning application, okay? The design, like several of the things that the applicants were talking about, these are, and Mike even mentioned, these are site-specific issues that we would typically see at a site plan. A lot of the times, and this is something I think we're going to talk more to the Planning Commission about over the next, even thinking next meeting or so, the level of detail of some things, not really considering this when I was having these discussions, but what level of detail do they need to have before we're comfortable moving something forward? That helps us to help the applicant say, hey, you need to have these things taken care of before we move anything forward. So just to be alerted to that as well.
Mike, you really had two issues, parking and the driveway, right?
Parking and density, it just, let's see.
It minimally meets our requirements, though, correct, Doug?
Well, as far as the parking is concerned, if that's what you're specifically talking about, I will say they are providing 2 spaces per unit like we've asked them at each unit, but then they are also providing the additional parking areas. So in that regard, are they meeting what our ordinance says? Yes, they are. Now, as far as some of the other issues, like I said, density and whatnot, like I said, the comprehensive plan where this is located is identified as a general urban area, which does recommend densities up to 10 units per acre. Now, that doesn't mean that every development that you look at has to be 10 units an acre. There is a timing element involved in things, and there is location elements. Just because it recommends 10 units an acre in the general urban area doesn't mean that every area should have 10 units an acre. There's latitude there to make a decision.
Lee?
I was writing down some of the numbers because, like you said, we are looking at this for zoning, and they meet the requirements, which is consistent for 3.15 units per acre. they've met 2 parking spaces. That's excluding the garage, which I struggle with that one because a garage is built to be a garage, even though we know it's storage, but we need something more substantial to reference, or something that says 85% of Americans don't use their garage. I mean, I feel like I need something a little more.
Well, we did have, Mike had passed along, I remember, I guess it was at that meeting.
There was a meeting ready
yeah,
for that or something.
What was it, Mike? If it was
it
a
research?
Two-car garage, like
Yes.
only 50% of the people are using, yeah.
The Department of Energy study
yeah.
recently did a study. I can't remember how many houses they looked at, but of the houses they looked at, half of them with a 2-car garage were completely full of stuff. They're not parking in it at all. Of the remaining 50%, half of those can only park 1 car in a garage.
So based on that, if I'm understanding it right, 25% of those, the ones they looked at were actually using both bays.
So we can say 90 units would roughly have a space in the garage, or at least 1 space in the garage. So I'm looking at that. I don't like the parking areas being so far from units, because I think it's almost like a trash receptacle. The more easily accessible it is in close proximity, the more likely it is to be used. But 56 extra spots with the 2 that meet the minimum on the exterior, and then we say half of the garages meet the garage storage. I mean, you're really reaching a level of parking that, for me, I'm struggling with. You know, I guess for me, the engineer side of me comes out. Let them work out the turn lane. They'll either be able to meet our requirements or not, and meet the site distance or not. And then, like you said, if they can't, then it goes away. And so for me, I know the density's a little more than we like, but for me, I just see enough to support this one. That's just for me. And so I'm willing to let them move forward and see if they can make something work of it. So do you need that to be in the form of a motion, or? Okay, I'd like to make a motion for approval of this rezoning request, subject to all staff comments and working out all those details that they say they can meet and work through in the site plan phase and development phase.
Thank you, Lee.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve item REZ 21-002 for Davis Lamb. Any other questions or comments? Mike?
Doug or Mike or Tanya, public safety, we have no public safety concern about the one inlet outlet for 180 dwellings.
I would say we do.
It meets codes, all that.
There's nothing in our zoning or subdivision regulations that requires multiple ways in and out. Now, our subdivision regulations do strongly recommend stub outs, which they have the one to the west. Now, and all, like Mike had said earlier, you know, there's some question about when the timing of that's going to happen. There's also one to the north, but that means that other property has to develop. So, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know how they could do another entrance in and out in the park, the way that this property is situated.
So kind of like Marvin suggested earlier, I mean, you're almost a half a mile deep in the back. So from a public safety standpoint, that meets our regulations. If there's one in and one out, that meets our current regs.
The subdivision regulations do have minimum block lengths, or maximum, I should say. I believe it's 1,800 feet. So, I mean, now looking at this, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but they do have the stub out right in the middle. That should help break it up, especially that area in the back. But that's pretty much the closest thing that we have to anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you subtract off the step system lot, which is like 15.6 acres, two parcels, 180 units divided by 41.36 acres is 4.35 units per acre. That's what I'm getting at, the density. And I know we factor in the step lots, but.
Lee, can you restate your motion and what you're actually asking of Mike to make him feel comfortable in order to approve this, what are you asking of him specifically so that I understand?
To work out the turn lane and entrance location to meet sight distance and safety requirements, much as Commissioner Cush has talked about, to make sure it's constructible and it meets all the AASHTO requirements. The ones I keep coming back to, I look at the parking, and even though some of those overflow lots are spread out, they're providing 56 spaces. They're providing, if we say 50% of the garages, so that's 90 parking spaces plus the 2 on the exterior. So I feel like the parking it's not any worse than some locations. I mean, does it have challenges? Yes, but I don't have the answer exactly to that. Mike, I think you guys were okay with the drainage and everything here. Am I correct in that?
Well, they're showing 3 proposed stormwater management areas, I believe. Yes, 3, 1 up front and 2 in the back. So that'll have to get worked out with site plan as well as the turn lanes and everything.
To me, there's several things that are met, and most of those occur on 231, but also the force main you had mentioned. Some of those things will may weigh in on or factor into those challenges that they face. Trying to think of what else. I think it was mainly the 231 issues in the turn lane.
Chairman, I have one more question. Can we, and I don't know if this motion is the time to do this, or if it's later down the road after they come back with their grading plan and figure out the final number of lots and everything, but I want you all to put your visual hat on, and if you were in your automobile and you were a resident here and you're turning in, once you get past that first little bend after the first 5 units, you have got a really long straightaway. And all you're going to see are rooftops and a whole sea of cars parked in the driveways. Now you've created a long drag strip because of the narrowness of the property, and you're forced to that side because of the sewer issue. Where I'm getting at is, we absolutely, in an HOA, cannot have the ability to park on the street. There's only one street. There's no side anything. For safety, for trash trucks, for safety of kids walking or bicycling, you cannot put a car in the main street. So I know in my HOA, you absolutely cannot park in the street. They'll tow you in a heartbeat. Because of this layout and because of the parking problem that's already existing, you know the overflow is going in the road. And somebody's going to get killed if you do that. And it's going to create a giant cluster when you have 180 homes trying to get out in only one spot on Lebanon Pike, in and out. This is a poor design, in my opinion. It's a poor layout and it's a poor traffic design. And I'm going to vote no. But I'm telling you, if now's the time to put in a motion to approve, to demand that there is no parking in the street, if now's the time to do it, I would like that added to the motion. If that comes at a later date, Doug, remind me and I'll add it at a later date.
It can be added in here. I think we even discussed that when Mr. Shiring was at the podium about putting that into the pattern book,
now,
so that's a definite requirement.
And part of that premise of that motion to approve was to include that, because they said they could state that in the HOA and do much like you said in your HOA and have people towed or removed. And that's part of that motion is that understanding that was what we discussed and that's what will be in there. But also, too, I believe that traffic circle right dead in the center is supposed to help with traffic calming as well. Is that correct?
Right. Well, the original design actually didn't even have that. That was added in per our request, actually, because we wanted to see some sort of a break.
Yeah, that's what that's there for,
right.
is to prevent that wide open drag strip.
I mean, Mr. Cush's comments are well taken. I mean, that still is a long straightaway, but it's not as long as it was. I mean, it's better than it was, I will say that.
So, are we confident then that we are insisting on no parking in the street? If we are, then
I don't know how you're going to enforce that, though. I mean,
You're going to have to demand, the developer controls the HOA. Until all the lots are sold, the developer is the HOA.
and then what happens? I also agree with Mike. I know they're got a lot of restraints, and it squeaks by all our regulations, but I think we can do a better plan. You know, even if you just add, and there may be on paper significant parking, but if you look at it, people are not going to park on one end and walk all the way to the middle. You know, they're just not going to do it. If they're going to, you know, if they add a small parking lot in the middle of the strip, add one more, even though it's more than required, I think it would be a better plan. And less parking on the street if there was one more parking lot in the middle of the long run.
That's kind of what Doug and I talked about earlier, but, you know, what if they added more accessory parking in phase one? And then to compensate, maybe put in a little stub street back here, a little cul-de-sac with some units around that. This is open space, but nevertheless, it's an opportunity to, you know, maybe offset the loss of units up in phase one to phase two. So, but if you look at the plan, let me get back there. You know, you've got two parking spots, one at the cul-de-sac and one in phase two. You know, there's a large number of units that'll have to share this one parking spot. That's why I'm saying that it's just too much in too small of an area, to me, anyway.
I agree with Charlotte, Mike, and Mike. I can't support this either. I think reality will be people will park in the streets, and there's no guarantee that the enforcement will be made to do anything about it. I mean, history shows that. There's some subdivisions, I don't disagree with Mike, that do enforce it and do a great job, but in certain situations, or most situations, they don't, and they won't. I do empathize with our planning staff on, you know, trying to do better to help the applicants and, you know, from an ordinance perspective. And I do agree we could do better in defining what those changes need to be made in order for Doug and Mike to do what they need to do and work with applicants, so we're not going through multiple iterations of these zonings or whatnot for an applicant to come back and still not get to where we want to be. But I do feel it's our responsibility. If we don't feel comfortable with legitimate grounds, then we shouldn't approve these type things. And I mean, you're talking 150 units, minimum 2 cars. That's 300 cars at a minimum, and it's going to be more than that. I mean, you just know the way it is. And I struggle back with, you know, what are the grounds, if they meet our requirements, what are our grounds to deny this application? And, you know, Mike's brought some up, but if they work it out, then, you know, they met everything else without us making changes.
Right.
So.
Well, let me just say a couple things here. I mean, first of all, the reason for me bringing up the issues with the parking and everything was just so you knew what the regulations were on parking. I'm not necessarily stumping for the applicants or anything. We're not their advocate. Just want to be clear. If I'm coming across like that, that's not at all the intention I'm trying to give. So if that's how it came across, I apologize. But this is a planned development. It is a rezoning of property. They're asking for something that they are not entitled to under the current zoning. The comprehensive plan, like I said earlier, does make recommendations in general urban areas for allowing densities up to 10 units an acre. Now, that being said, the Planning Commission adopted it, the County Commission did not. So it's advisory in nature. It is not a legal document like our zoning ordinance is. I do think that if you have concerns, there are concerns as far as, well, maybe this is too dense for this area. That development to the west that I talked about earlier in the city is about 2.7 units an acre. If you were to do the math, that would make this, if you use that same number for this, you'd be looking at about 150 units. That'd be about the equivalent is what you would get there. So you could say, well, maybe 3+ units is too much at this point, for this area. I mean, that, in my mind, is a valid reason for recommending a denial of something. Again, the applicant is present and is listening to these concerns. They may want to take it back and look at it some more. They could voluntarily say, look, we want to defer this and we want to kind of massage this a little bit more. Maybe we could take some of the recommendations that were made tonight as far as the parking areas, as far as some of the design of those units, and say we can come back with a different design that may be a little more palatable, that might address some of the concerns that were brought up tonight. The reason I brought up the issue with the zoning ordinance earlier was just so you understood. I mean, there are legal requirements in our zoning ordinance that we have to abide by. If they say, no, we want a decision tonight, I mean, based on the information in our ordinance, I mean, that's what has to happen, because we don't want to open ourselves up to any kind of legal liability because we didn't follow all of our ordinances. So I just throw that out there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Pettis.
When it come up the first time, we brought up some of these same things. We talked about one way in, one way out. We talked about the fact that there are 180 units on this and the way that they're lined. We talked about the situation that, you've got 180 vinyl units there all lined up in one spot. The parking of the cars, every bit of that. And it was to be taken back and to work with that again and make those changes and to bring us back something else that would be something that we could use and something we'd go from there and maybe make our decisions better. We spent over an hour that first time working with that. Now it's brought back to us again. We still have 180 units. We still got one way in. We still got one way out. We're still concerned about the cars that's parking there. It's the same thing. And now we're almost an hour and a half talking about this unit again. And I'll just say, due to the safety that I see in this, of what we've got here and what this plan is, until the number of units, I think, is reduced in some way of changing this plan, I'll vote no on it.
Okay, we have a motion, and we have a second to approve, considering staff comments. And there are a lot of them. Any other questions? Brent, you have something you want to say? I'm sorry?
Can we make a couple comments? Are we allowed to make a couple comments?
I'll recognize you if you have something to say.
Yes, I do.
Please come forward.
You can put the site plan back up. Okay, so the one thing to hit on with parking, I know that we're looking at a study and people don't use garages, correct? We're speculating a bit there. I mean, what was the study based on, townhomes or single family? And I'm not going to go too deep into this. I just want to make the point that single family homes typically have a lot of stuff. Townhomes are people that are first-time buyers or they're move-down buyers. They don't typically have as many things. Now, 3 bedrooms here, if there are people that need 3 cars, they are essentially forced to use the garage space because they have the 2 driveway and they have the 1 garage. The ability to park on the street is extremely limited because of the driveways. There's not enough space between the driveways where
parking would be an issue here. So I think that with the nature of townhomes themselves and the way that the driveways are close together, which prevents on-street parking, and the restrictions within the HOA that you can't park on the street, I think that will eliminate that issue. If you could go back to the site plan. So the code does say 2 spaces per unit. We're providing overall 3.3. That's the 3 spaces per unit, which I am counting 2 driveway and 1 garage, and it's the 56 spaces. So I believe that we're well in excess of the parking requirement. One thing that we have been discussing in the back now is if we placed an additional parking driveway or parking lot. If we did a 4th parking lot with 20 spaces, what we would be doing is taking out 4 units and providing another opportunity for guest parking spaces. So what that does is provides the additional spaces, it breaks up the long length of units, and then it also provides a shorter walk to those guest parking spaces. So it makes it more enticing to use if you don't have to walk that distance. So that's one thing I'll propose that we can do, is add an additional parking lot. In terms of the straightaway, I agree with the comment about the sea of parking. If we were to provide more driveway spaces, you're simply providing more of that aesthetic that takes on more of a commercial development versus a residential development. I think we're getting a little worried here, kind of like big box stores. You kind of plan for parking on Christmas Day, and most of the parking goes unused. So if we were to try and cram in more parking spaces in front of these units, I think it would start to get away from one of the concerns from last time, was the longevity of these communities that we're creating. So if we have a bunch of cars parked throughout here, it changes the aesthetic and the feel of it, which is something I don't believe anybody would want for a residential development. Last comment, and then I'll end on this, and it's regarding density. I'm not blowing smoke when I say this. I believe that your guys' comprehensive plan was very thoughtful. And it was very thoughtful, and what you guys did was you took certain areas around the county and you focused density in those areas in village centers. And then you looked at the arteries between those village centers and you said you want to concentrate high densities on those. I think that's a very good idea, because what it does is help create those walkable downtown or village centers throughout the community, and then you provide areas where you target high density so that you take development pressure off of other areas that maybe want to maintain more of a rural character. So with this site, looking at 10 units to the acre, what you're hoping to do is provide housing options. You're providing housing density to meet future demands in housing, and you're also strategically targeting that density along collector roads that go into those village centers. So with that in mind, I think that it's meeting your guys' long-range vision for what you want to see in some of these sites being developed. At the same time, one last note, when you look at the site, there was comments about looking like it's being crammed in there. 50% of this is open space area. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's what is counted within the code, but this is area that's going to remain green space or trees. So I don't think the site is overly crunched with units. It's going to feel fairly open with large buffers around where the homes are. So with those comments, I think what we would say is if the idea of adding an additional parking lot could help alleviate some of the concerns and maybe allow members to make a positive recommendation, we would choose to proceed forward in that manner, where we would work through site plan to address the site distance issues and the grading at the entrance. We understand those are potential issues, and we have to work through those, and we're willing to do so. And if we find a big issue later on when we dive into the details, obviously we have to come back for an amendment to this and continue to work through it. So with that, I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Any questions for Brent while he's up?
First of all, thank you. On the site plan right behind you, and the the plan that shows the two units side by side, we have a 10-foot minimum easement in between, so we have 20 feet in between buildings. You could still put a car or two out there if you wanted to. And what's going to happen is those families that are on those in units they'll use that spot for the overflow. I'll bet you steak dinner they will. So that's why I'm like super adamant about trying to keep parking off the only street in the subdivision. That's my hang-up. That's one of my hang-ups. Because people they'll hit the easy button and they'll park, and they'll even let and it'll be a fire drill. They'll take up half of their driveway with the front or rear end of the car in the street to shuffle out cars just so they can find a place to park. I appreciate the fact that you're maybe losing a unit and adding another piece of parking, but I still have a problem with these folks will still have the ability to park on the street, and that's just going to not only be unsightly, but it'll be hugely dangerous, and that's my problem.
So, again, we're willing to put them in the HOA. I think we could also add a note to the plat that's actually recorded at the county that could help as well. At least giving, if there is an issue with it in the future, at least give somebody the teeth to enforce it. The HOA doing it themselves, and then the plat, it's a recorded document that says you cannot park on this street. So maybe that's an additional tool that could help.
There are actually signs on Casey Lane, which splits my subdivision in 3 rivers. There are signs on Casey that says you will not park here.
Which we'd be willing to add the signs to. I mean, if we could put 3 signs throughout in some of those open space areas where there aren't the units, where there's open space to do it, we could put signs that says no street parking. Certainly do that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
David, is that you?
Yes. Doug, if it's denied, when can they come back with another plan?
If it goes forward through the whole planning, or through the whole county commission, I believe it's 9 months. That's assuming it's the exact same plan. Now, if they don't pursue it to the county commission, they could come back next month with something different. Now, since this is a plan development, they'd have to do neighborhood meeting and all that. We'd require that. I mean, realistically, it'd be a couple of months before they'd be back if it's denied. At the planning commission, they don't pursue it any further.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just make a quick comment. I believe I heard Brent say that if the parking was still an issue, you would work to add additional parking. If this body were to approve it, you would work to get additional parking.
We would be willing to add an additional parking lot on spaces.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but could that be included in
Part of that motion needs to include that additional parking provision along with the enforcement piece to include that on the plat. And
the commitment to put additional parking in?
For the commitment to put that additional parking.
Craig, I believe you seconded. Is that okay? I'm not sure that that's exactly correct procedural, but that's what we're going to do. Any other comments or questions?
A question with Mike and Doug. With all the changes and the promises that are on record now, how do you feel about the concerns that you had before?
Well, I'll speak at least for myself. I'll let Mike talk about the access and issues with the site distance and everything. As far as parking is concerned, I mean, I think adding the additional parking area will help. I mean, am I going to be out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, making sure that they don't park on the streets? Obviously, I'm not. And the county just in general does not have the personnel to handle that. There's going to have to be, it's going to have to be on them. And if it becomes an issue, they're going to have to complain to the county. We're going to have to do something about it at that point, because that is part of their plan development. I think the extra parking spaces will help. Losing a unit, it's 4 units. I know that doesn't make a huge dent in their overall density, but taking out 4 units and adding a parking area, I think, does help in that regard. I'll let Mike address the issues as far as the access and the vision of that.
Well, I mean, like I said, previous meeting and this meeting, anything can be worked out potentially with grading and access for the site visibility. I hope the cemetery is not an issue with, the site triangle. But I still think we're going from trying to put 5 pounds in a 3-pound bag to 4.9 pounds in a 3-pound bag. So I still think the density is really a big issue. 1 parking lot will help, but I think there needs to be more. So I mean, I kind of agree with Commissioner Cush. You've got driveways along the front here, but you've got some breaks in them where people are going to park on either side. So I still think it's way too much, but that's me. I'll be a negative Nancy. So.
Was there a study, Mike, had to be done on the impact to Lebanon Pike, US 231 for this additional?
They did the traffic study for that, and that's what the turn lanes recommendation came up, that the road that they're building will have a dedicated road in, lane in, and a dedicated right and left coming out, but they also need to improve Lebanon Highway with a deceleration right turn lane in coming southbound and a northbound left coming in.
But as far as counts, as much traffic is on that highway, then you're at an additional, that was considered in this as well, how many additional cars this was going to add coming in and out and down Lebanon Pike, both directions from Jefferson Pike down to Thompson Lane, that whole corridor that we know is a very difficult area to maneuver through, and we've done nothing to impact that.
Typically, the turning movements at the intersections is the big issue. Lebanon Pike's, it's a 2-lane road, but it's got, 12-foot lanes and 8-foot shoulders on each side. So it's a good road right now. It's the turning movements that are the issue.
And if I
And close to this density, or close to this, are there other subdivisions of this size and density close to this area?
Well, the one that backs up to it, it's in the city, is the closest one. It's about 2.7 units an acre, so it's a little less than this. Some of the other, that chart that I had up there earlier kind of showed you some of the other subdivisions that we've approved as planned developments over the last several years. That, again, roughly what we see is usually around 2 to 2.5 for planned developments. There have been a few 2 that were over 4. But the majority of the ones we see are generally in the 2 to 2.5 range. But you mean like in proximity to this? Beyond the one that the city approved, now when you start getting into the city limits, you probably have more dense development, but the closest development that backs up to it's about 2.7 units per acre. But it's single family. It's detached homes, as I recall.
And just a note, the parking in the grass will probably be self-regulated when they put the step boxes in. Cars will fall in. So they won't do it but once.
And I do want to readdress something that David Jones asked about a minute ago. If they were to be denied, I pulled up my code because the 9 months was kind of nagging in the back of my head that may not have been right. It's 6 months following a denial by the Board of Commissioners, not 9. So I apologize for that. I want to double check that.
Other questions? Once again, we have a motion and a second to approve with conditions and staff comments. Ready? Call the roll, Gail.
Charlotte P. Kip Pinion,
No.
Craig Lynch, David Jones,
No.
Jim Averwater,
Yes.
Lee Bogle, Marvin Whitworth,
No.
Mike Cush,
No, and my reasons are I still have concerns for the motoring and pedestrian safety of the public.
Pettis Reed,
No.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
4 yes, 6 no.
4 yes, 6 no's. This is scheduled to be heard before.
Oh, wait, hold on, I'm sorry. The motion failed. There still needs to be a motion for something. Either, okay, now before that we have the motion to deny and we have a second, now I think we need to talk about the reasons for that. Now, Mr. Cush, you mentioned some of those. I will point out, looking at our PUD regulations, there are general requirements when it comes to plan developments, talking about compatibility measures, changes in density, placement of buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Those are issues and those are components to any plan development that I think can be referenced in any kind of a motion, either for or against. So, we need to have some reasons as to why a denial was made or why an approval was made when it boils right down to it. So,
I would like to make a motion to deny based on my reasons, which are I still see too many red flags that put the motoring public and pedestrian public in danger.
We have a motion to deny. And a second. Now comments. Any other reasons? Want to
Mr.
add?
Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
David.
I think that the density of this property and the number of dwellings units with one entrance is unsafe.
I will add that to encompass reason for pedestrians or motoring public safety.
Anything else? We have a motion and a second to deny REZ 21-002 for Davis Lamb. Call the roll, Gal. A yes will be a motion, will be your recommendation to deny, okay?
Charlotte P. Yes. Chip Pinion. Yes. Craig Lynch. David Jones.
Yes.
Jim Averwater.
No.
Lee Bogle. No. Marvin Whitworth.
Yes.
Mike Cush.
Yes.
Pettis Reed.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
No.
For 6 yeses.
Motion carries, the motion to deny carries 6-4. Now, this is scheduled to be heard before the full county commission on May the 13th, I believe it is. And it'll also be a public hearing. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. On that Thursday, May the 13th. And it will go forward with a recommendation to deny. And once again, this is, for those of you that are listening, we are a recommending body, not a decision-making body, although we make a lot of decisions that are recommendations. So this recommendation will go to the county commission once again on May the 13th. Let me ask a quick question. There's been some print over the last couple of years about graveyards and cemeteries, and they pop up, when some of this land is being developed. What do we do with that? Is there anything that we specifically as a planning commission should be doing with those?
I don't necessarily think there's anything specific that you need to do. Now, whenever we review a development plan that has that, we always, first of all, bring that to the attention of the developer, to the Planning Commission, of course. Now, this cemetery, of course, that we're referring to tonight is off-site. It's right to the north of the subject property. Now, the state does have regulations that deal with moving cemeteries and things like that for the development. There are regulations for that. If they incorporate it into the design of their subdivision, they have to provide perpetual access to it. There has to be some sort of an easement so ancestors, or descendants, I should say, can visit the graves. So we will make sure that that is always taken care of whenever we see that come up.
I know it's been an issue in print and paper the last couple of years in restoring graveyards and doing other things like that. Is there anything that we as a county need to be doing to try to figure out who's there and what those things are?
Well, the county actually, in conjunction with MTSU, did a study. It's been several years, along with our archives department and everything, where they identified a great number of these older cemeteries that are out there. There's actually a GIS map layer that shows them, so that's one of the layers that we use whenever we're discussing potential development with property owners or those looking to purchase property. Now, does that mean that they found every single one that's out there? I mean, chances are no.
Right.
So, I mean, that is kind of a living document, map layer, if you will. So, but yes, there has been study done on that.
Most of these are really small with 3, 4, 5 graves, those type of things, and I'm assuming that's probably what this one was as well, but I'm not sure about that.
How many were in that, do you remember?
18.
Or 18, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty big. But I know a lot of them, like the one that was in the paper this past week, they didn't really know how many. 3, maybe 4, maybe 5.
Yeah, some of them, unfortunately, they've fallen under, disrepair, neglect, if you will, for so many years. The gravestones aren't there anymore. There's no way to be able to tell how many graves were there. They just know that there was something, without doing a lot of, extra work. There's really no way to determine exactly how many are. They do the best they can with the information they can find.
If one of these cemeteries, old graveyards, are found under a development, would our comprehensive plan restrict them from doing anything with that particular group?
Not really, no. The comprehensive plan, I don't think, really gets into too much as far as regulations on cemeteries. But again, the state does have regulations as far as what can be. We have seen developments where they've actually moved graves from one area to another because they were going to develop one area and they put it where it was going to be more of an open area. But there are state regulations that handle that.
Okay, thank you. Item 6BC, REZ 21-006, Charlie Jenny for Churchill LLC. The location is Epps Mill Road. Commission district is 6. County Commissioner is Veronica Buchanan. Site of the site is approximately 11 acres. Tax map is 156. Existing zoning is RM for residential medium density. Proposed zoning is EAC for employment and activity center. Doug.
Yes, thank you. The applicant would like to use a portion of this property for a heavy equipment rental shop. There is a concept plan that has been included with your agenda packets. There's also one on the big screen, if Mike would go ahead and pull that up. The plan does show the proposed building location, parking areas, equipment yard. They're also showing a portion of that site being reserved for future expansion. There is the ability to possibly sell a portion of this property in the future. They are showing on the concept plan, you can see north is actually pointing down on this map, just so you're aware looking at that. They are showing a sewer connection to the city of Murfreesboro. I don't believe that is something that they're actively looking to use. Of course, if they were, they would have to get permission from the city of Murfreesboro to actually tie into it. Considering the changes that Murfreesboro City has made in servicing outside the city sewer customers, that may be difficult to do, but that was shown on there. But the applicant is aware that if they wanted to pursue that, they'd have to do that through the city. Access, of course, is along Epps Mill Road. Their concept plan, as you can see, does show an area for parking with, again, potential expansion. As far as the required number of parking spots, design, et cetera, that would be determined if this is approved and whenever we see a site plan. No traffic study has been performed at this time, but we could require one whenever a site plan was submitted if we felt one was warranted. Properties in this district, the EAC district, are generally required to provide a Type 2 buffer adjacent to property that's zoned for single-family purposes. You can see the majority of the property surrounding it would actually be zoned to similar zoning EAC. The portion of that property right to the east, that would still be zoned residential medium density, so there would have to be some buffering there. The EAC is a little bit different than some of our other commercial zones in the fact that it's more of a mixed-use zone. It allows for commercial uses, but also allows for some light industrial uses. Those uses will dictate, in part, what kind of buffer they'll have to actually show. If they're going to be doing something if it's zoned and they end up doing something that's more of an industrial nature, we'd require a Type 3 buffer. So I just wanted to make sure that the Planning Commission was aware of that. Of course, they would have to submit a landscape plan, and we would verify compliance with our ordinances at that time, as well as to our performance standards. This property is located within the Epps Mill Road Employment Center. Most of the property, as you can see from the map Mike had up, is already zoned EAC except for that eastern side. Of course, we always have discussed our concerns with the conditions of Epps Mill Road, but like I said, we could require a traffic study whenever a site plan is submitted if we felt that the use being proposed was going to have a significant amount of traffic, to see if there's any site improvements or improvements to Epps Mill Road that would be warranted. So with that, I know the applicant is present, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for staff?
Yes. Doug, could you refresh me? The property to the south a couple of years ago, I believe we went through a rezoning on that, and it went from residential medium density to EAC, right. And there was a sort of a preservation of that corridor for that Manchester Highway. Is that what they're doing here to kind of maintain consistency?
Well, you can see on the map, right, when you look at the map, that area, you can kind of see on, kind of where that line is between, kind of see the most. That line, this property line wasn't there originally, but this was kind of the line right here. So this area was left out of the EAC.
It was voluntarily left that way.
Well, right. I mean, that was what ended up coming out of the meetings.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you can see that this, I mean, it's a little further over, but we're not talking about this tract right here, right there on the corner. So there would still be this.
Oh, so it's not part of that.
Correct. Yeah, okay. This piece is not. It's just this portion, right? This is a separate piece of property right here.
Okay.
And this is a separate property owner right to the south as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes.
Other questions for staff? Is the applicant available? Evening.
Chairman Phillips, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm still nervous from that last one, so I'm sorry. Denials are tough to watch on anyone's part. But anyways, I'm here representing Mr. Charlie Genie, and he would like to put a heavy equipment rental operation at this location, and I want to do some explanations about what that entails. Mrs. Benz, Brenda Benz is here. I was helping her with her rezone, so that's the property you mentioned before, and so pretty familiar with this interchange. And I wouldn't be coming before you if I didn't think this was probably a fairly suitable use for this location, primarily for that reason, that this business, because it's heavy equipment rentals, there's approximately 10 trips a week that they expect out of this operation, so that would average maybe 2 trips a day. And the nature of heavy equipment is once it's out, it's out. You know, their goal is to keep it out in the field. It'll stay out there for weeks if it's grading equipment or a front load or what have you. So it's not more of a residential type of rental where there'll be people use it for 4 hours and come back and try to beat the clock. It's much more of a bigger operation than that. 95 to 99% of their traffic will go to 24. And that's the protection. What you mentioned is that Manchester Pike has almost like a scenic corridor kind of connotation to it. So anything I've done along that corridor we've been really concerned about making sure we don't lose that rural character. So this operation, they have no interest on going down Manchester Pike. That's not how they work. They need to be regional. They need to get places, and they're going to be going where new construction is happening. And so, they're going to be using 840, 24, 40. They're not going to be using subsidiary roads like Manchester Pike. As far as it would be, because they're giving equipment to construction sites typically close in the evening, so they're really a daytime operation, which is another issue because that Love's truck stop becomes quite the place at night, and so does that Epps Mill interchange parking lot, whatever we call that, at night. It's just pretty amazing what happens on that interchange. Knowing the traffic concerns and location, I feel like it's a good use because I don't think there could be a use that has less traffic than this. The operation really has one employee. It's not a point-of-sale retail shop. There's not people coming in and out the door. So they're taking the equipment, they send the equipment out. It's my understanding that they have a driver that delivers their equipment, so the person that's actually on the road at Epps Mill Road interchange will know that interchange. There won't be a bunch of new people coming in and trying to figure out how to navigate that situation. And it's not that bad during the day. I think the primary issue there is at night. So not only are we not working really at night, but we're working with drivers that are familiar with the situation. As far as the aesthetics of the building, I just want to bring to your attention that the parking's in the front of the building, the service doors in the rear of the building, the service yards in the rear of the building, and that's tried to do our best to any sort of unsightly views will be behind the building itself. The property has really limited septic capacity, so that's another thing I think is working in our favor with this application is he doesn't need septic. It also prevents another business that he has an out parcel, but any other companion business will not need septic either. So as far as the potential of heavy traffic as a result of this development or any development in relationship to this property, because of the limitations on septic, we don't think that'll be an issue at all as far as the overall capacity of this site. We were hoping that there would be a sewer connection in the future. City of Murfreesboro is not really giving away any allocations towards sewer at this time. We don't anticipate that at any time in the future, so whoever develops on this site will be committed to using the existing soils areas that are available on the site. And last is, again, I talked to Veronica, and I know there's other things going on out there that she's had some pretty intense meetings about. This one would be, from her standpoint, it's such a limited use, limited traffic. I don't think there could be much of a better operation happening on this particular site. I know Epps Mill one day will be improved, and everyone's waiting for that day. There's a ton going on the other side of the interstate that's going to require just as much improvement to the interchange. But in this particular application, and to your point, as far as we're not abutting Manchester Highway, so that was pretty important as well. I knew that that's a sensitive area. And I was expecting about 60 people here tonight to be against this because they're really organized out there at Buchanan neighborhood. But I think the fact that they're not here it shows there's been a little bit more flexibility. The fact that they understand that that interchange is developing more towards an industrial, commercial use, as long as it's not creeping down Manchester Highway. So we feel good about the application. We feel good about the request. Again, I'm still nervous from the last one, so I trust that if you need questions, I can help you become less nervous. I'm more than willing, but I'm here for y'all if there's anything you want to ask me. Thank you.
You did mention equipment service. It's just on their own equipment, not open to the public or anything.
Correct. It's not a retail shop. They're not fixed. Yeah, it's their rental. What comes in damaged, they'll fix it there and ship it back out.
Okay. With that expansion, is that sort of what that's for?
They don't.
Or office?
It's a new operation, so they're just trying to scale it. They're buying 10 acres. They don't think they're going to need 10 acres. Sure. Yeah, the goal is not to have equipment on site. It's really to get it out. So they may have it for a few days and get it gone. And with the development in our region, equipment is just going everywhere. So that's why the 10 acres is what's for sale. They feel like it gives them some flexibility if they need to expand their operation. They don't really see going beyond what's already shown as that kind of definitive line for the expansion area. So, good question.
Staff is recommending approval for this. Their concern deals with traffic, of course, on Epps Mill Road, and you're prepared to submit a study?
If we need to, it's really it's so limited, Chairman Phillips, as far as the actual capacity of what this operation does, that
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Clyde, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'll just chime in on that. With the use that he's proposing, I don't think we're so concerned about. But if that were to fall through and then something else comes in that we felt had more potential for impacting the traffic at Epps Mill, then we could. My point was we could require one should we feel the need is there.
Even though this is zoned residential and it probably never will be developed residential, the potential for that to change hands and creating more traffic exist. So if this body were to recommend approval with that condition on it, you're going to be okay with that?
Or to do a traffic study? You know, it's an investment property. Charlie, is there any issue with if that's being requested to perform a traffic study?
Well, and I'll just say this, being that this is a conventional zone, we can't require a condition upon it, but we do have language in the ordinance that allows us to do it. So, it's something we could do anyway if we felt that we needed it.
And Chairman Phillips, with that in mind, I think that the challenge we're running into is that with so limited soil capacity, there's not a lot of things that can operate without people, and this is one of those operations that has a very, very low employment base. It's just not it can't be the density that would create a lot of traffic at this location, at least from our studies and what we saw as far as capacity, soils-wise.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions for the applicant?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
In concerns to the motoring public, Clyde.
As far as what?
In concerns to the motoring public. All right, so let me ask you. You've got, looks like in the bar napkin sketch that you did on the last page on our iPad, looks like you have two entrances or an entrance exit in the narrow part of that trapezoid, which is closest to the big intersection, right? And then you have a middle parcel that is for expansion, I'm assuming for the business that we're talking about right now.
Correct.
Right. So that will not get, they'll use that current or proposed ingress egress, maybe, probably.
Yeah, Mike, the reason it's dashed in the building, I didn't dash in the parking lot, but really the logic is they just continue to keep the stockyard, the lay down yard in the back, and then the building just keeps on segmenting on and the parking just goes with it.
Okay. But the southern, I guess, most parcel is definitely something for sale. So that will ultimately require an additional entrance to Epps Mill at some point in time when they sell that. So we don't know what that business is going to be. We don't have any clue at that point what traffic that will add. I am in agreement with you that this type of business equipment rental will be a slow a few number of trips. However, those trips will be tractor trailer bringing in a heavy piece of equipment.
Yes, sir.
Which will slow the process down on Epps Mill, bring that to a grind, which may not necessarily be a bad thing. But I am in agreement with you that this type of business is probably a good fit for that location, and the number of trips that will cause, it would be not impactful to that area, other than the fact that it will be slow-moving tractor trailers, which will have its own set of issues. If you looked at the Titan map, that looks like they average about one crash a month in that little strip right there. The good news is it doesn't look like, from the data we were given, none of those are really of injury, probably because that traffic moves so slow. But we all know Epps Mill is a problem, and we wish it could be fixed tomorrow. But so far, so good on what you've presented. But I just want to make sure we understand that when they sell that third parcel, there is going to be another connection to Epps Mill, which gets you closer to Manchester Highway just a little bit.
Mike, and just one thing just to know, because I think the nature, Mr. Genie understands that if he sells that piece of property, it has limitations again based on the septic capacity. So there's a chance that there could be a shared access, that whoever that new owner is, just if that's a real concern, rather than having, like you said, two side-by-side entry and exit points, they might be able to do a shared access to limit the amount of ingress and egress on Epps Mill.
I know the condition of the roadway near the interchange is has issues now with all that high level of large truck traffic. Even though this is one, there's a difference in straight ahead traffic or moving to the intersection of 41 and making twisting, turning movements. Is it going to be part of looking at that structural capacity of that Epps Mill right in front of the business, at least where all that movement's going to be, or
as far as the road stability, as far as
right? And I know that may be more site plan related than it is zoning, but that's just something that as you get closer to Manchester Highway, I don't know that it's at the level of what Love's and some of those drive on. So I'm not saying it has to be at interstate level, but it may warrant a look.
Absolutely.
And I'll add that, obviously staff's heard all this discussion, and if this is approved and we do see a site plan, we'll make sure that we see all that.
Thank you, Doug. Other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Clyde.
Thank you.
This time I'll declare a public hearing open for REZ 21-006, Charlie Jenny Jr. for Churchill LLC. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Seeing or hearing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, based on the information that was presented to us tonight, I would make a motion to approve, subject to staff comments.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve REZ 21-006 for Charlie Jenny Jr. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, Gal.
Charlotte P. Yes. Chip Pinion. Yes. Craig Lynch. David Jones.
Yes.
Jim Averwater.
Yes.
Lee Bogle. Yes. Marvin Whitworth.
Yes.
Mike Cush.
Yes.
Pettis Reed.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Motion carries.
This rezoning request will be heard before the full county commission on May the 13th, Thursday, May the 13th, 6:30 p.m. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday. It'll be a morning meeting at 9 a.m., April the 26th. That's also on a Monday. Anything, Doug?
No, sir.
Mike?
No, sir.
Gail?
Nope.
Craig? You rather be over there?
Well, we'll have to kind of evaluate that as we move forward. As long as the COVID protocols are in place, this is probably the better place to meet. We'll just have to kind of go with it and see what happens. So we'll keep you up to date.
Anything else? Thank you. We are adjourned.